Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Arab countries have condemned Israel's plan to annex parts of the occupied West Bank and the Jordan Valley. In a statement after a virtual meeting of the foreign ministers of the Arab League, the organization said the move is the new war crime against Palestinians. The ministers urged the US to back away from supporting the plan and said that the Arab countries will support Palestinians to confront it. They also called on Russia, EU and the United Nations to convene an urgent meeting to save the chances of peace and a two-state solution. Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghaid said that any Israeli decision to annex parts of the West Bank would not change the status of the land. Palestinians have expressed outrage at Israel's plans to cement its hold further on the land it seized decades ago. The Taliban say they have released 52 more Afghan soldiers in the northern province of Kunduz under the Doha peace agreement. In a statement, the group said it wants the prisoner release process to be expedited to save inmates from COVID-19. So far, the Afghan government has released over 500 Taliban fighters in exchange for 60 military personnel. The two sides are required to release 6,000 prisoners under the Doha peace deal. The prisoner swap is pivotal to kickstart intra-Afghan talks to decide the future course of the country. Pakistan has rejected baseless Indian allegations of infiltration attempts and unfounded claims of targeting launching pads across the line of control.
Addressing a weekly press briefing in Islamabad, Foreign Office spokesperson Aisha Farooqi said the Indian propaganda machine is in overdrive. She said Pakistan rejects provocative statements of the Indian Defence Minister, including his preposterous claim that India was dominating the enemy. Farooqi said India seeks to use his allegations as a pretext for a false flag operation. Meanwhile, Foreign Officer has summoned Indian Charge Affairs Gaurav Ahluwalia to protest ceasefire violations along the line of control. In a statement, Foreign Office said 2 women and a soldier were martyred by Indian troops unprovoked firing in Rakhchiri sector yesterday. The office told Indian envoys such senseless acts are in clear violation of 2003 ceasefire understanding. It urged India to allow UN Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan to play its role as per UNSC resolutions. The office said 2002 alone, India has committed 919 ceasefire violations and targeted civilian populations.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says India is using the COVID-19 pandemic to intensify the genocide of Kashmiris. Khan said Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government is continuing its fascist RSS-driven ideology and carrying out war crimes in the valley. Khan said the Modi regime is violating the 4th Geneva Convention by attempting to change the demography of the disputed region. He said international community has a responsibility to take note of and act against these war crimes. The Prime Minister said Kashmir issue is recognized as disputed by the United Nations. The Prime Minister highlighted recent arrests of Kashmiri's journalists under controversial Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Under this law, the Indian government can keep the arrested people in jail for up to 7 years. In a related development, the government of Indian-occupied Kashmir has told the Supreme Court that the right to access the internet is not a fundamental right. The top court was hearing a petition filed by the Foundation for Media Professionals for restoring 4G internet access in the valley. In its reply, the government said free speech and expression, including the trade and internet access, can be curtailed in general public interest. It said the internet ban is not only least restrictive, but also most appropriate and has reasonable nexus with the purpose to achieve state security. Targeting Pakistan authorities claimed that high-speed internet restoration will lead to the glorification of Pakistan Army and freedom fighters. They said a lifting ban will lead to swift uploading and posting of provocative videos and other heavy data files. The occupied valley is reeling under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 269 days. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the COVID-19 death toll in the country remains under control. Addressing a media briefing in Islamabad, Khan said the nation is cooperating with the government in the fight against the epidemic. He said Pakistan has itself started manufacturing medical equipment necessary to tackle the virus. The Prime Minister said he is well aware of the difficulties faced by the overseas Pakistanis during this pandemic. Khan said he has instructed all the embassies around the world to take care of Pakistani expatriates. Pakistan has reported 358 deaths among over 16,000 coronavirus cases, with more than 4,000 recoveries so far. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister discussed the COVID-19 situation with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi over the phone. The discussion between the two leaders focused on the respective national approaches to managing the coronavirus crisis. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mehmood Qureshi has discussed the coronavirus crisis with his counterparts from Finland, New Zealand and Iran. The Foreign Office said ways and means to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and its socio-economic fallout were shared during the conversations over the phone. It said the foreign ministers were briefed on Pakistan's response to the coronavirus crisis. Qureshi also highlighted Prime Minister Imran Khan's global initiative on debt relief for developing countries. Spain's death toll from the novel coronavirus has dropped to 268, marking the lowest tally in nearly 6 weeks. In Iran, the daily tally of fatalities has fallen to 71, with total reaching over 6,000. Earlier, the United States reported over 2,600 deaths in a day, pushing the country's overall total to nearly 61,000. The global COVID-19 death toll has crossed 227,000, with over 3.2 million people infected. More in this report.
With the global economy in tatters, the International Labour Organization has warned that COVID-19 will cost half of the world's jobs. But in the absence of a vaccine, the mounting deaths continue to merit restrictions. Germany has extended its strict travel warning, while UK continues to reel from the pandemic.
We're moving to an improved daily reporting system for deaths, so that deaths in all settings are included wherever the individual has tested positive for COVID-19, rather than just those in hospitals. And those figures show that up to yesterday on the new measure, we have recorded an additional 3,811 deaths in total.
A ray of hope emerged after a recent study showed that Gilead's experimental drug is extremely effective against the disease. But US infectious disease official Anthony Fauci insists the data on Gilead's drug needs to be further analyzed.
The data shows that remdesivir has a clear-cut, significant positive effect in diminishing the time to recovery. This is really quite important for a number of reasons, and I'll give you the data. It's highly significant.
World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom has dispelled mounting pressure and criticism by the US and its allies. The UN health body's chief said the organization had acted quickly and decisively against the novel coronavirus. Meanwhile, South Korea has reported no new domestic COVID-19 cases for the first time since February.
Iran's ambassador to the UN has called US efforts to extend an arms embargo a breach of Security Council Resolution 2231. In an interview, Majid Takhtravanchi called Washington's claim of still being a part of JCPOA an unprecedented joke. He says Security Council members should pay heed to the fact any such moves by Washington violate UN resolutions. Earlier, the US said it will not let Iran buy conventional arms even after a UN embargo on Tehran expires in October. Speaking in Washington, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the US will work with the UN Security Council to extend the embargo. He urged Britain, France and Germany to back US efforts to force the snapback of all UN sanctions on Iran. Germany has banned the Iran-backed Hezbollah on its soil and designated it as a terrorist organization. The decision was revealed by a German Interior Ministry spokesperson on its official Twitter account. The spokesman said the police are conducting raids across the country to arrest members of the group. Security officials said up to 1,050 people in Germany are part of the extremist wing. Germany had previously distinguished between Hezbollah's political arm and its military units, but it has for the first time declared the entire political group as a terrorist organization. The UAE has called on all the Libyan parties to commit to the UN-supervised political process to end the war. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said Abu Dhabi supports for a political solution based on the Berlin Conference. The ministry said UAE commends Khalifa Haftar-led Libyan National Army for conducting anti-terror operations in the country. The statement expressed concerns over Turkish interference in Libya via the deployment of militants belonging to terrorist organizations. The ministry said Turkish involvement is the violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. The UAE is a known supporter of Khalifa Haftar, who nullified the UN Unity Deal of 2015 and declared himself the ruler of Libya this week. Yemens Southern Transitional Council says the political crisis can be resolved if a power-sharing deal with the government is implemented. In an interview, STC spokesperson Nizar Haytham said the group thinks of the Riyadh Agreement as a route to resolving the dispute. Haytham said the self-rule declaration last week was sparked by unjustified delay in implementing the pact. He said firm decisions must be made to appoint a shared government, a governor and head of security for Aden. The Riyadh Agreement would have given the Southerners a 50% representation in a joint government. STC provides fighters to the pro-government alliance battling against the Houthi rebels. Turkey says it has killed 4 militants of the Kurdistan Workers Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry says the fighters were killed during Operation Peace Spring. The ministry said it will not stop the operations against the militants in the region. Meanwhile, the ministry said Turkish and the Russian forces conducted their 7th joint patrol on a key highway on Syria's northwestern border. It said the troops from the two countries carried out land and aerial inspections in Idlib. The patrolling is part of an agreement brokered between Turkey and Russia on March the 5th in Moscow. China says it has no interest in interfering in the US presidential elections in November. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Gang Shuang said the quadrennial election was the internal affair of the US. Talking to reporters during a daily briefing, Shuang said Beijing hoped Washington will not try to drag China into it. This comes after US President Donald Trump said that Beijing will do anything it can to make him lose November's elections. Trump said China will prefer the presumptive Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden, over him. He said Beijing will want to ease the pressure his administration has placed on it regarding trade and other issues. It's a time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The death toll from the novel coronavirus has jumped in several African countries. The Africa Center for Disease Control says the continent has reported over 1,500 deaths and more than 35,000 infections. More in this report.
The number of deaths has risen to 444 in Algeria, 380 in Egypt, 103 in South Africa, and 168 in Morocco. South Africa also reported over 350 infections, the most new cases recorded in one day, and bringing the total to 5,350. Sudan, Mali, and Tanzania also reported new virus-related deaths. WHO emergencies expert Mike Ryan said the availability of tests is still a critical issue in the continent.
I can assure you that we have recently effected deliveries of personal protective equipment and more testing and test kits to 51 countries on the African continent. Those flights were just completed this week.
Guinea, Cameroon, Morocco, Senegal, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Eswatini have recorded new cases.
Kenya has banned the movement in and out of 2 refugee camps hosting 400,000 people to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Health experts and humanitarian groups have long warned that the virus outbreak in densely populated refugee camps will be catastrophic. Interior Minister Fred Matiang'i said restrictions apply to Dadaab camp in the east, which is home to over 217,000 people. He said curbs are also imposed in Kakuma camp in northwestern Kenya, home to some 190,000 people. Kenya has not imposed a full lockdown but a dusk to dawn curfew and has blocked movement in and out of Nairobi. The IMF says fiscal measures implemented by the governments against COVID-19 need to be harmonized to combat climate change. Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said the measures should ensure an environmentally sustainable recovery from the pandemic. Georgieva said taking measures now to fight climate crisis is essential in order to leave a better world for the future generations. She said governments should mandate commitments to reduce carbon emissions while providing financial lifelines to carbon-intensive companies. Georgieva said with oil prices at record low levels, it is time to phase out harmful subsidies. She said the governments need to prioritize investment in green technologies, clean transport, sustainable agriculture, and climate resilience. Global carbon emissions are set to drop to a record 8% this year because of the lockdowns to protect people against the coronavirus pandemic. The International Energy Agency projects the fall will be 6 times larger than the previous record in 2008 recession. The outbreak of the novel coronavirus in November last year has brought nearly the entire world to a standstill. Measures to curb the spread of the virus are sharply reducing humans' impact on the environment. According to International Energy Agency, restrictions on travel and business have significantly slashed pollution. It forecasts that carbon emissions will fall to their lowest level in a decade this year. But the agency says this is no cause for celebration. Scientists want CO2 emissions to fall urgently, but not by shutting down the economy. Global electricity demand is set to decline by 5%. That's the largest drop since the 1930s Great Depression. The IEA says low carbon sources are on track to deliver a record-breaking 40% of the global electricity market in 2020. The key for many world leaders now is to promote green industries of the future. South Korea is getting headway in its fight against the coronavirus as the country recorded no new local cases on Thursday. In a tweet, President Moon Jae-in said it is for the first time in the last 72 days that no local case of COVID-19 was found in the country. He said there are 0 infections in 14 days since the general elections were held on 15th of April. The president lauded the citizens for helping curb the spread of the virus. The country imposed strict lockdown to stem the spread of the virus in the country, barring people together. South Korea reported over 10,000 cases and more than 200 deaths from the pandemic. The death toll from the fire at a construction site has risen to 38 in the South Korean city of Incheon. Rescue officials say most of the 38 victims were construction workers building a 4-story warehouse. Firefighters continue to carry out search and rescue operation overnight. The police, along with the rescue authorities, have launched a joint investigation to determine the exact cause of the fire. Officials believe an explosion in an underground level of the warehouse sparked the fire. Firefighters said victims were unable to evacuate as the fire spread quickly. Rishi Kapoor, the legend of the Indian film industry, has passed away at a private hospital in Mumbai today. Kapoor was diagnosed with leukemia in 2018 and returned to India last September after a year-long course of treatment in New York. The 67-year-old actor was taken to hospital yesterday after he complained of breathing difficulties. In a statement, actor's family said Kapoor was grateful for the love of his fans poured from the world over. The family asked fans to stay at home due to the movement restrictions imposed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Rishi Kapoor debuted as a child actor in 1970 in his father Raj Kapoor's film. The deceased actor belonged to the Indian film industry's famous Kapoor family. One of the world's largest lunar meteorites goes on private sale at Christie's in London today. It has been valued at $2.49 million. The moon rock, weighing around 13.5 kilograms, was probably struck off the surface of the moon by a collision with an asteroid or a comet. It is thought to be the fifth largest piece of the moon ever found on Earth. There is just 650 kilograms of moon rock known to be on Earth. Like many meteorites that are discovered, it was found in the Sahara by an anonymous finder, then changed hands.
In the 1970s, the Apollo program brought back about 400 kilograms of moon rock with them. And scientists have been able to analyze the chemical and isotopic compositions of those rocks. And they've determined that they match certain meteorites that have been discovered. So we're absolutely certain that these rocks do in fact come from the lunar surface.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. The eurozone economy has shrunk at the sharpest pace on record in the first quarter as the COVID-19 pandemic forced countries into lockdown. A first estimate of GDP between January and March showed a contraction of 3.8%, worse than during the financial crisis. France reported a steep fall in economic activity in over the same period. Spain's economy shrank 5.2% in the first quarter, bringing to an abrupt halt 6 years of robust growth in the country. Italy saw its economy contract by 4.7% in the first quarter of 2020. The National Statistics Bureau said Italy's latest decline was the biggest since 1995. In Germany, unemployment has increased, though it remains relatively low compared with other nations. U.S. stocks have declined as investors digest dismal economic data along with the latest batch of the major tech earnings. At the start of the trading day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average shed about 1%. The S&P 500 is trading lower by about 0.75%, while the Nasdaq Composite is trading marginally lower. Meanwhile, oil prices jumped on early signs of a rise in demand, which has been crushed by the coronavirus crisis. Royal Dutch Shell has cut its dividend for the first time since World War II, following the collapse in global oil demand due to the coronavirus pandemic. The energy giant also suspended the next tranche of its share buyback program. The move came as it announced a 46% fall in first quarter net income to $2.9 billion. Chief Executive Ben van Beurden has warned of continued deterioration in the macroeconomic outlook. He said Shell was taking further prudent steps to bolster resilience and underpin the strength of the balance sheet. U.S. plane maker Boeing plans to add 16,000 jobs in a drastic round of cost-cutting due to the coronavirus pandemic. The grounding of Boeing's 737 MAX plane also led to this massive job cut. In a statement, Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun said the demand for commercial airline travel has fallen off a cliff. He said the pandemic is dealing a blow to company's business. He further went on to say that a temporary shutdown of its factories in Washington state cost the company over $100 million. The company lost $1.7 billion from its core operations in the first quarter of 2020. Plane makers, airlines and suppliers have been left reeling by the pandemic, which has crippled passenger travel and affected major economies. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Special.